Have you ever realized what happens when you finally decide to step back? When you stop returning messages instantly, when you stop explaining yourself, when you stop showing up for people who only remember you exist when they need something? Something shifts. The air changes. People who never even knew your middle name suddenly want to know everything about you. They panic. They question. They reach out frantically, trying to pull you back into the role you've been playing. But something inside you has already changed. You've tasted what it feels like to not be enslaved by the constant demand to be available, to be present, to be accessible. And once you've tasted that freedom, even for a moment, going back becomes impossible. That's where the real transformation begins. When you stop being available, everything changes, but not in the way most people think. Think about it. Most of your life has been constructed around the myth of accessibility. You've been taught that being there for people is a virtue, that quick responses make you reliable, that constant presence proves your worth. But here's what no one tells you. This constant state of availability has become a prison disguised as devotion. You say yes when every fiber of your being screams no. You respond to demands that drain you. You maintain relationships with people who would never do the same for you. And with each compromise, each forced smile, each immediate reply to a message that should have been ignored, you lose a piece of yourself. You fracture a little more, your energy disperses. And the worst part? You don't even notice it happening until you're completely hollowed out, wondering why you feel so empty despite being surrounded by people. Carl Jung understood something crucial about human energy systems. He saw the psyche not as some magical infinite resource, but as a finite system that requires careful management. Every interaction, every emotional response, every attempt to please someone who doesn't deserve your effort, these all deplete your psychic energy. And when your energy is depleted, you become easy prey. You become predictable. You become a tool for anyone sharp enough to recognize the patterns. This is a trap. This is how people who understand human psychology keep you tethered to them. They know that if they can keep you reactive, if they can keep you performing your role, they maintain control. They own a piece of you. But what happens when you suddenly withdraw? What happens when you stop playing the game? Everything destabilizes. The people around you go into crisis not because you've done something wrong, but because you've disrupted their entire system of control. Suddenly they can't trigger you into immediate responses. Your silence is no longer available as their emotional outlet. Your presence is no longer guaranteed. And in that absence, something happens that terrifies them. They're forced to look at themselves. They're forced to confront their own emptiness, their own neediness, their own manipulation. And that's unforgivable to them. That's why they'll say you've changed. That's why they'll accuse you of being cold, selfish, hard-hearted. But the truth is simpler. You've just stopped being functional for them. Now, people who live constantly available don't realize they're operating from a place of profound scarcity. They believe that if they're not useful, they're not worthy. If they're not accessible, they'll be abandoned. So they give and give and give, thinking that one day someone will finally reciprocate. But that day never comes, because people don't respect what costs them nothing to obtain. No one values what's always there waiting. And the more you make yourself available, the less value others assign to you. You become a convenience. You become something they use, not someone they cherish. And when you finally realize this, when you finally understand that your availability has been your currency in a transaction where you're being massively underpaid, that's when your perspective shifts entirely. Here's what happens next. You start to set a boundary. Maybe it's small at first. You don't respond to a message for an hour, just an hour, and already anxiety creeps in. Did they notice? Are they offended? Will they think you don't care? These thoughts are the chains talking. These are the mental prisons you've constructed so effectively that you can't even see the walls anymore. But if you push past this discomfort, if you keep the boundary in place, something remarkable occurs. Your energy stabilizes. Your mind becomes clearer. You're no longer in a constant state of reactive panic, trying to predict what others need and deliver it before they even ask. You're in your own space. And in that space, you begin to remember who you actually are beneath all the masks you've worn. Jung spoke about the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted by society. And virtually everyone is drowning in their persona. They've worn it so long, they've forgotten it's a mask. They think it's their actual self. They defend it, justify it, exhaust themselves maintaining it. But the moment you decide that your peace is more important than fitting the role others have carved out for you, that's when individuation begins. That's when the real work starts. Because becoming unavailable doesn't mean you become cold or indifferent. It means you become selective. You become intentional. You decide that your energy is sacred, finite, and meant only for those who genuinely appreciate it. Think about the people in your life right now, the ones who only reach out when they're in crisis, the ones who praise you only as long as you're useful to them, the ones who've made you feel like you owe them your constant presence. When you become unavailable to them, they will react. Some will get angry, some will try to guilt you, some will attempt to provoke you into the old patterns, hoping that if they push the right buttons, you'll slip back into being their emotional safety net. And this is where most people fail. They give in to the pressure, they respond to the provocation, they justify themselves endlessly, trying to make the other person understand. But here's the secret. Understanding is not what they're after. Control is what they're after. And if you engage in that explanation, you've already lost, because you've validated their right to demand your justification. When you truly stop being available, you stop explaining. This is radical. This is uncomfortable. Your silence will be interpreted as coldness, as arrogance, as cruelty. People will say you've changed, and they're right. But you've become sovereign. You've reclaimed ownership of your own time, your own energy, your own peace. And that kind of autonomy is threatening to anyone who depended on your imbalance to maintain their own sense of control. If this is starting to make sense to you, if you're recognizing the patterns I'm describing in your own life, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel. Because what we're talking about here goes deeper than just setting boundaries. It's about psychological transformation. It's about understanding how your mind is used against you. And once you understand that, everything changes. The power of unavailability lies in something that most people never realize. When you're silent, when you're not explaining yourself, when you're not performing, you force others to do something incredibly uncomfortable. You force them to observe their own behavior without your commentary as a distraction. Your absence creates a mirror, and most people don't want to look in that mirror. They don't want to see the desperation, the manipulation, the neediness that they've been projecting onto you. So they lash out. They intensify their attempts to get you to react. They might even tell others that you're the problem, that you've become impossible. But understand this, people who are comfortable with themselves don't need you to be constantly available. They don't crumble when you don't respond immediately. They don't spiral into drama when you set a boundary. The ones who do these things are revealing something essential about themselves. When you become unavailable, you're breaking what Jung called the projection cycle. Projection is the psychological mechanism through which people place their own unwanted qualities onto others, seeing in you what they refuse to see in themselves. The person who demands constant reassurance from you is often someone who cannot reassure themselves. The person who needs you to validate them is someone who cannot validate themselves. The person who gets angry when you become less available is someone who is afraid of their own internal chaos. And as long as you stay available, as long as you keep responding and performing your role, you enable them to avoid this confrontation with themselves. But when you withdraw, when you refuse to be their emotional container anymore, they must finally face what they've been avoiding. And that's devastating for them. That's why the backlash can be so intense. Your unavailability is a threat because it removes their primary defense mechanism. They can no longer use you as a way to escape their own shadows. This creates what feels like a crisis to them, but it's actually an opportunity for real transformation. But they won't see it that way. They'll see it as abandonment. They'll see it as betrayal. They might try to convince you that you're the one with the problem, that you're selfish, that you've become someone they don't recognize. And all of this is true, in a sense. You have become someone they don't recognize, but that's because you're no longer the mirror they've been looking into. You're no longer the vessel they've been pouring their dysfunction into. You're finally becoming yourself. Here's what happens on the other side of this break. At first comes loneliness. Not the loneliness of social isolation, but the loneliness of finally being responsible for your own peace. When you stop being available to others, you have to become available to yourself. You have to sit with your own thoughts, your own pain, your own unfulfilled needs. And this is hard. This is brutally hard. Because for so long, you've been using other people's drama as an escape from your own inner work. You've been so focused on managing their emotions that you've neglected your own emotional landscape. So when the noise finally stops, when people stop demanding your attention, you're left alone with yourself. And that can feel terrifying. And this is crucial, this is where real healing begins. In that silence, in that space freed from the constant demand to perform, something extraordinary happens. You begin to hear yourself again. You begin to reconnect with your own desires, your own values, your own truth. The constant static of other people's expectations begins to clear, and you can finally think. You can finally feel without immediately translating that feeling into an action designed to please someone else. You can finally exist for yourself, not as a support system for others. This is individuation. This is the process Jung described as essential to becoming a whole person. As you move through this transition, you'll notice something remarkable. Your energy returns, gradually, steadily, like a tide coming back in. Tasks that exhausted you before become manageable again. Conversations that would have drained you entirely now barely touch your reserves. You're no longer hemorrhaging energy into relationships and dynamics that were never meant to sustain you. You're not explaining yourself endlessly. You're not trying to convince people to understand why you've changed. And in that conservation of energy, you find power. Real power. Not the power of domination or control, but the power of presence. When you walk into a room, people sense it. Not because you're performing more effectively, but because you're finally centered in yourself. But let me be clear about something. This transition will cost you. People will leave. Some relationships will dissolve entirely. Some friendships that you thought would last forever will simply evaporate because they were built on your dysfunction, not on genuine connection. You will experience rejection. You will be misunderstood. You will be alone for a while. And you have to decide right now, in this moment, whether you're willing to pay that price, because there's a fork in the road coming. You can continue as you have been, available to everyone, empty inside, slowly dying beneath the weight of everyone else's expectations. Or you can choose yourself. You can choose your peace. You can choose to become a mystery again, unforgettable, not because of what you do for others, but because of what you've done for yourself. The thing about unavailability that most people don't understand is that it creates value. When you're always available, you're worthless. When you're selective, you become precious. When you're mystery, you become magnetic. Because the human psyche is attracted to what it cannot easily obtain. We don't value what we can have whenever we want. We value what requires something of us. We respect what commands respect through its absence of demand. This isn't manipulation, it's just how human psychology works. And once you understand this, you can use this knowledge to transform your life. By withdrawing your constant availability, you're not being cruel. You're not being selfish in the negative sense. You're honoring the economy of human relationships, where value flows to those who know their own worth. Here's what I want you to understand as we move toward the conclusion of this. Becoming unavailable is not a rejection of the world. It's not cynicism. It's not misanthropy. It's actually an act of profound self-love and paradoxically, an act of love toward others. Because when you stop being available to serve as their emotional dumping ground, you're forcing them to grow. You're withdrawing your enablement. You're no longer allowing them to avoid the internal work they need to do. Yes, they'll resist. Yes, they'll make you the villain in their narrative. But in the deepest sense, you're offering them a gift. You're offering them the chance to become whole themselves, just as you're becoming whole. The silence that follows your withdrawal will be uncomfortable. You might feel guilt. You might wonder if you're being too harsh, if you should answer that message, if you should explain yourself one more time. Don't. This is the moment that determines everything. This is where you either recommit to your old patterns or you forge a new path. The discomfort you feel is not a sign that you're wrong. It's a sign that you're changing. It's the friction of your old self being burned away. And on the other side of that friction is freedom. There's a book that dives deep into this psychological transformation, into how to understand these patterns within yourself and reclaim your energy. It's called Reclaim Your Essence, and it breaks down exactly how to navigate this transition without losing yourself completely. The link is in the description. Now tell me, are you ready to be uncomfortable? Are you ready to be misunderstood? Are you ready to be alone for a while if that's what it takes to find yourself? Are you willing to watch relationships dissolve, to endure the silence, to become someone people can no longer easily control? If the answer is yes, then you're ready for what comes next. You're ready to step into a version of yourself that is sovereign, centered, whole. You're ready to stop being available to everyone and start being fully present to yourself. And that, fundamentally, changes everything. So, if this message resonated with you today, write in the comments, I choose myself. Let's see how many of you are ready for this transformation, and don't forget to subscribe. Much more is coming. See you in the next video.